I checked my bank account after a family reunion. $15,000 gone. No warning. Just my sister laughing and my brother-in-law saying they needed it more. My hands were shaking as I reached for my bag. I kept my voice steady and told them they should be ready for what comes next. They chuckled like it was some kind of joke, and then came a loud thud that echoed through the house. The front door swung open with force. And there was Gavin, my brother-in-law, leaning lazily against the fridge, gripping a beer, that same smug grin plastered on his face. He looked right at me and repeated it. They needed the money more than I did. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering above the refresh button on my banking app. I had already tapped it 3 times, hoping it was some glitch. But the numbers had not changed. $5.65. That was all that was left. Just the day before, my account held over $15,000. Yes, over $15,000. My voice caught as I tried to process it. From the couch, my sister Leah let out a soft laugh. She was lounging like it was just another cozy evening. Her legs were tucked underneath her, wineglass in hand, completely unfazed by what was happening. She waved it off, saying it was not a big deal. According to her, they did not actually steal anything. After all, we were family. But they had drained my account. Gavin just shrugged, saying it did not count as draining if they planned to return it, eventually. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. I looked around the room and met eyes with my mother. She was knitting quietly, not even acknowledging me. I raised my voice and asked if she had known. She sighed, like I had just ruined the mood over nothing. She reminded me that I had a decent job, no house payments, no children, and lived on my own. In her mind, I would be fine. So that somehow made it acceptable? From the corner, my father spoke up without looking away from his phone. He told me to watch my language. I turned toward Leah, demanding to know how she even got into my account. She said I had left my login info on the family computer and walked away. As far as she was concerned, it was my own fault for being careless. I clenched my fists, my breathing becoming shallow. Gavin tried to downplay it again. He said they did not blow the money on anything crazy. They used it for rent, food, basic needs. But they never asked. Leah snapped back that they did not think they needed to. After all, I had been paying for things here and there for years. What difference did it make if the money came from me directly or through my account? I slowly reached for my bag. Nobody flinched. Nobody said sorry. Not even a hint of surprise on their faces. Mom asked if I was leaving already. I zipped up my coat and told her not to worry. I would be following up. Leah rolled her eyes and threw out one last comment, claiming they needed it more. Said it was just the truth. My hand found the doorknob. I paused for a second and said they should not mind what would happen next. Laughter followed me out the door, but something was already in motion. For them, I had always been the helper, the safety net, the one who always came through. Outside, I heard a voice behind me. My cousin Paige had followed me to the car. She called out, asking if I was all right. I did not look at her as I yanked the door open. She spoke softly, said she heard what Leah said, and it was not okay. I stayed silent. If I opened my mouth, I knew I would yell. The truth was, this was not some one-time thing. It had been years of this. I had always been the stable one, the reliable one, the one with a solid job. So somewhere along the way, I became the family ATM. It began with little things. Leah once missed her phone payment, so I stepped in and covered it. Then Gavin lost his job. He asked to borrow a bit of money to tide them over. I helped. Later, they needed a birthday gift for their daughter. I offered once, but they just started assuming I would handle it from then on. Every time, they made it seem like it was my duty. Mom always said I was lucky. Her voice had that sugary tone with something sharp buried underneath. She told me I had a smooth life, and God gave me that ease for a reason, to share it. Dad would chime in too. He liked to remind me that I owed them. They gave me life, so now I should give them my paycheck. I had never asked them for anything. Not when I lost my job and spent 6 months stretching every dollar, living off nothing but rice and eggs. Not when I skipped out on vacations year after year, just trying to rebuild my savings account. Not even when I covered Leah and Gavin's mountain of credit card debt 2 years back. They never made any effort to repay me. Not once did I even hear the words, "Thank you." Last week, Leah asked if I was still planning to come to the family reunion. I told her yes and asked if I should bring anything. She replied fast, "Just yourself and your card." At the time, I thought it was a joke. Now I know she was completely serious. 2 days after everything blew up, Leah tried calling me. I ignored it. Then she called again. And again. Eventually, Gavin texted. Said she was panicking and that I should just talk to her. I gave in on the fifth call and finally picked up. Her voice came through low and shaky. She said we had a problem. I told her that much was obvious. She told me not to be like that, and then added that something had come up. I kept quiet. She kept talking anyway. Apparently, the electric company had shown up that morning. Their account was way overdue, and they had until Monday to pay before the power got cut. I asked her why that concerned me. She hesitated. Then came the pitch. They needed my help. I let out a bitter laugh. One of those sharp, dry ones that cuts more than it amuses. So they emptied my savings, and now they were coming back for more? She snapped that it was not just for her and Gavin. She said some of the money went to help Mom and Dad too. Dad's car had broken down last month. Did I not remember? Nobody had mentioned it. She said they did not tell me because I always said no unless it was a real emergency. I told her this was not just a family issue. What they did was a crime. She told me I was overreacting, that this was just family business. I reminded her they never even asked. She replied that they never thought I would mind. I had always helped. That is just who I was, right? There it was. That was all I was to them. That night, sleep never came. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every little moment from the past 5 years. Every time I covered for someone. Every quiet payment. Every time Mom told me I was the strong one. Every time Leah rolled her eyes the moment I paused before saying yes. They never treated me like a brother or a son, just a source of money. 3 days later, Mom called. She told me we needed to talk. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not bring up my work. She did not even mention the stolen money. She simply said we were having a family dinner. Just us. And she told me to come over that evening. I felt my stomach twist. I asked her what this was really about. She answered with that disappointed tone. She said I had caused a lot of tension. Apparently, I was the one causing problems now. Still, I went. Part of me was looking for closure. Part of me wanted to see if they would even bother pretending to apologize. They did not. When I walked into the house, Leah was already standing with her arms folded. Gavin sat next to her, looking bored like he had better things to do. Mom was busy in the kitchen, pretending not to hear anything. Dad was sorting mail like this was just another quiet night. Leah spoke first the moment I sat down. She asked if we were ready to act like adults. I told her that depended. Was she ready to admit she had committed felony theft? She rolled her eyes and scoffed. Said I was being over the top. She claimed it was not stealing. It was family money. I always stepped in. They needed it. Gavin agreed. Said I could afford it, so why the fuss? I told them they never got my permission. Leah shot back that I never said no either, because I had no idea they were doing it. She brushed it off as a detail. I turned toward Mom and asked if she was truly okay with what happened. She avoided my eyes. She said they all agreed. I had always been the one strong enough to deal with it. No one thought they needed to ask me. Dad added that they had trusted me to make the right decision. I stood up. And what did they think the right thing was? To smile at me while quietly draining everything I had worked for? Leah shouted for me to stop calling it theft. She said it was for the family. I told her if that was true, then she should not mind when the family had to face the consequences. Gavin narrowed his eyes and asked what I meant. I did not answer. Not yet. There would be no crocodile tears this time. When I walked through the door one night, everyone was already gathered. Mom was in the kitchen clinking dishes louder than necessary. Dad lounged on the couch, flipping channels like nothing unusual was happening. Leah stood near the window, arms crossed and jaw tight. Gavin was kicked back at the end of the table, looking like he was settling in to watch a game rather than deal with the fallout of what he had done. Leah greeted me with dry sarcasm, saying, "Well, look who showed up." I dropped my bag near the door and said nothing. I just wanted to get it over with. Gavin grinned and said maybe now we could all stop pretending I was actually robbed. But I had been robbed. I sat down. That was the signal. Mom cleared her throat, clearly trying to steady the moment, as if a gentle tone could undo what had been done. She spoke carefully, attempting to justify it all, how they were struggling, how there were no other options. The way she framed it, Leah and Gavin had been sinking fast, and I, as always, was the reliable one, the stable presence they could depend on without question. Dad nodded in agreement. He looked at me the way someone might look at a lifeboat, useful, dependable, expected to carry the weight. They genuinely believed I would understand. But I did not feel understanding. I felt cold. I told them what I saw. They had not asked. They had taken. And taking without permission is not an act of family, it is theft. Leah rolled her eyes like I was being theatrical, as if I had made too much of something small. She insisted that the money had not gone to waste, that it had been used where it counted. But I knew otherwise. I reached into my bag and pulled out the spreadsheet I had prepared. The paper slapped against the table with weight, evidence they never expected to face. There it was, line by line. Over $100 spent on cosmetics. Nearly $1,000 on food delivery. Thousands more to pay off Gavin's car. They thought I would never look. Gavin leaned forward, anger rising behind his eyes. It was written all over his face, shock that I had dug this deep, outrage that I had turned the tables. He asked how I could go through their accounts. But I had not just looked. I had tracked everything. Every dollar, every transfer, every withdrawal. My laptop screen came to life with rows of color-coded evidence. The entire timeline of what they had done was sitting there in black and white. And I had reported it. They were stunned. Leah's face lost color. She was no longer confident. Her voice cracked as reality settled in. She asked if I had really involved the police. The look I gave Mom was my only answer. She had insisted, over and over, that it was a family matter. But families do not steal. Families do not lie. Families do not watch you break and call it love. Dad's voice grew sharp. He could not believe I would go this far, turn against my own sister. But he did not see that she had turned first. Then came the knock. 3 deep, deliberate thuds shook the front door. Panic hit instantly. Leah went pale, clinging to the edge of the table like she might collapse. Gavin jumped up too fast, knocking over his chair. Mom backed into the kitchen, hands trembling. Dad froze, lips slightly parted, eyes locked on the door. The voice from the other side made it official. The financial crimes unit had arrived. Gavin looked at me, searching for some sign that it was a bluff, that I could stop it. But I did not stop it. I opened the door. 3 agents stepped inside. The lettering on their jackets said everything. One held a clipboard, another a tablet, and the third scanned the room with professional calm. They asked for me by name. I confirmed. They thanked me for my cooperation and took over from there. The room shifted. Mom covered her mouth, like holding in her voice could reverse what was unfolding. Leah collapsed into a chair, suddenly weightless. Gavin stood frozen, unable to process that this wasn't a nightmare. One of the agents addressed them. They were officially listed in a case involving financial fraud and identity theft. Mom was horrified. She tried to pull the family card, insisted that I was her son, that this was a misunderstanding. But the agents were clear. Being related did not erase the law. Leah pushed back, insisting they had not stolen anything, that they had every right to what was mine because I had always helped, because I had always been the one who gave. But wanting something does not make it yours. The agents told them to remain seated, and for once, they did. No one talked over me. No one dismissed me. No one laughed. Mom turned to me, tears already streaming, voice low and shaking. She tried to explain, said they were desperate, that I had always been the strong one, that I was the one they relied on. But I had nothing left to offer. She began to cry in full. Leah opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. Gavin looked ready to run, but stayed rooted under the weight of the agent's presence. I stepped forward and laid it out for them, not through anger, but clarity. Family is supposed to mean trust, respect. It means asking before taking. It does not mean pretending everything is fine while quietly bleeding someone dry. They had nothing to say. I picked up my bag, nodded to the agent, and stepped out. This time, no one followed. And in that moment, it became clear I was free. There were no cries from behind. No last-minute pleas. Not even Leah's usual guilt-ridden outbursts trailing after me. Just silence. The cold air met me at the curb as tires crunched across the driveway behind me, the agents leading them out one by one. I did not look back. That night, I drove without a plan, through streets lined with closed shops and glowing convenience stores. My phone buzzed constantly from the passenger seat, but I let every call go unanswered. I was not interested in apologies laced with denial. Around midnight, I found myself parked in front of a house I had not visited in years, my grandmother's. She had passed on, but I still carried the key. Always had. She once told me that if my world ever turned on me, I could come there. That her door would always be open. And that night, it was. I slept for 10 full hours. No missed messages that mattered. No guilt tightening in my chest. No weight pressing down just from being near the people who used to call themselves my family. I woke up early, made a cup of coffee in one of her old chipped mugs, and stood at the window while the sun stretched across the backyard she used to love. For the first time in a very long while, I could finally breathe. But the peace was not left undisturbed for long. Later that afternoon, an email arrived. It was from Dad. The tone was sharp, full of disappointment. He accused me of taking things too far, of humiliating the family. He questioned my loyalty. I read it once, then closed it without responding. Not long after, Leah's name appeared on my phone. Her message was bitter. She was furious that her accounts were frozen, furious that Gavin's job was now at risk. She blamed me for everything, called it all a punishment over what she described as a few small payments. Small? This was not about a few dollars. This was about years, 5 years of quiet, unseen sacrifice. 5 years of pouring into a black hole that never gave anything back. Then came another message from Mom this time. A voicemail. Her voice was soft, frayed at the edges with panic. She sounded more fragile than I'd ever heard her. She said this should have stayed within the family, that it did not need to escalate this way. There was fear in her tone, genuine fear, as she admitted they were being threatened with charges. There was talk of losing the house. That part repeated in my mind long after the message ended. They might lose the house. And in that moment, I felt nothing. Not anger, not revenge, not satisfaction, just emptiness. Because the truth was, I had already lost my home, years before, when they decided I was worth more to them as a wallet than as a son. 2 days passed in silence until a message arrived from someone I barely knew, Gavin's brother. We had never been close, barely exchanged words even during family gatherings. But the message was simple and blunt. He wanted me to know that Leah was shifting blame. She was now claiming I had approved the transfers. A lawyer was apparently involved. He told me to watch my back. I almost laughed out loud. Even now, as everything around her collapsed, she still could not own a single decision. She had always been good at rewriting the story to make herself the victim. That night, I got in touch with my lawyer. I was done playing it cautiously. I asked him to forward everything we had, and I added something new to the list, a request for a restraining order. Not every message that week carried threats or manipulation, though. A few days later, I received a short email from Erin, Gavin's sister. We had barely spoken in recent years, but her message surprised me. She told me I had been right. About all of it. About the way they treated me. About how toxic the environment had become. She admitted she used to think I was distant or cold, but now she saw it differently. She believed I had been brave. That word stuck with me for a long time. Brave. It was the first time anyone in the family had ever used that word in reference to me. Not long after that, another call came through. The number was unfamiliar. I almost declined it. Something told me not to. It was Leah. Her voice was barely above a whisper, strained and exhausted. She sounded defeated. She began with what could loosely be called an apology, though it was more about her regrets than mine. She described how things had spiraled out of control. Gavin had been suspended from work. Mom was a wreck. Dad had shut down completely. Then she said something that made it all click. She had always known I had the power to bring everything crashing down. And now that I had, she could not believe I had gone through with it. I listened in silence. She pleaded for me to make it stop. Promised to do whatever it took if I would just end it all. And for a brief second, something flickered inside me. A trace of compassion, maybe. But then I remembered how she had smirked the night of the reunion. How she had casually justified stealing from me by saying they needed it more. That memory hardened me all over again. This was the result of choices she made. And I had finally chosen not to pay the price for them. That night, I made myself a quiet dinner. Played music I had not listened to since my college days. Sat outside on the porch with a hot mug of coffee and watched the street settle into its nightly stillness. No one asked for anything. No one tried to manipulate me with guilt. No one reminded me that I was only valuable when I was useful. I was no longer the emergency fund, the fixer, or the family's unspoken backup plan. I was just me. And that was finally enough. I had drawn the line. No more bailing them out. No more sacrificing my peace to keep them comfortable. People talk about peace like it is loud, like it arrives with a bang or a celebration. But peace, I've learned, is quiet. It sounds like stillness, like a phone that does not ring, like the absence of texts that say, since you're the only one doing okay. It is uninterrupted silence, and it is beautiful. 3 months have passed since the day everything changed. 3 months since the investigation began. 3 months since they looked at me with disbelief as agents entered their home and exposed the truth they had buried for years. They always said blood is thicker than water. That family is forever. But here's what I've come to understand. You may not get to choose your relatives, but you can choose how much of yourself you are willing to lose in the name of keeping them happy. And I had lost enough. The fallout came quickly. Leah and Gavin tried to recover their image. Their attorney reached out with a proposal to quietly settle the matter. No apology, no admission, just damage control. I told my lawyer exactly how to respond. Let it burn. About a week later, I received a letter from Mom, 10 pages long. Her handwriting was the same, deliberate and careful, but there were signs of tremors in her pen strokes. She wrote about how everything had escalated, how they never intended to hurt me, how she hoped I could see the broader picture. But then came the line that said everything. They had simply assumed I would always be there, because that is what good sons do. It was not an admission of guilt. It was not an apology. It was a confirmation of the very pattern that had nearly broken me. They had expected silence, submission, service. They never expected me to say no. I did not write back. I did not call. And for once, I felt no guilt about it. I left. New apartment, new state, a new number. There were no surprise visits from Leah. No unexpected knocks from cousins asking for a little help. That part of my life was over. My boss noticed a shift in me, more focus, more clarity. He offered me a promotion. I accepted. Turns out, when you are no longer secretly carrying the weight of 4 adults and their chaos, you perform better. You live better. I slept deeper, ate more mindfully, breathed easier, because I was no longer breaking under the weight of people who refused to say thank you. Then, one morning, a letter arrived with no return address. Inside was a check for $1,500 and a note. It was from Erin. She said she had left him, that she had been scared. But seeing me draw the line had shown her that walking away was possible, that setting boundaries did not make you cruel. It made you brave. She mentioned everything I had quietly paid for over the years, for her daughter, for the rent, for things they never even acknowledged. And while Gavin never thanked me, she wanted me to know that she was grateful. I read the letter twice. And then, without warning, I cried. Not from pain, not from grief, but because for the first time, someone saw me. And not as a bank, not as a backup plan, but as a person. Because for the first time, someone in that family truly saw me, not as a source of money or the one to blame when things went wrong, but simply as a person. People sometimes ask whether I regret how everything unfolded. And honestly, no, I do not. What I do regret are the years I waited. The countless nights I lay awake, worrying about bills that were not mine. The vacations I canceled, the opportunities one passed up, also I could make sure they stayed afloat while I quietly sank. I regret living so tightly while they ordered takeout, bought clothes they did not need, and posted smiling family pictures with captions about gratitude that never included me. I regret how small I made myself, how often I kept quiet just to keep the peace, when deep down I knew a boundary had been crossed. But do I regret standing up? Putting a stop to it? Walking away from the mess they expected me to keep cleaning? Not for a second. A while back, during a session, my therapist had asked why it took me so long to finally draw the line. At the time, I told her it was because I believed saying no meant I was giving up on them, that refusing help meant I did not care. She looked at me and explained that saying no is sometimes the only way to teach others how to care in return. That stuck with me. It still does. Not long ago, I ran into someone I used to know in high school. She had clearly heard about what happened, and I braced myself for judgment or that look of quiet pity. But instead, there was only understanding in her expression, almost admiration. She said something about how most people never break free from that kind of dynamic. I walked away from that conversation, standing a little straighter. Last I heard, things have only gotten messier on their end. Gavin lost his job. Leah's accounts are locked. Mom's scrambling to keep the house, and Dad is still pointing fingers at everyone but himself, convinced it was outside influence that shattered the illusion they worked so hard to maintain. They still do not understand. I did not destroy anything. I simply stopped pretending it was not already broken. There are moments, quiet flashes, where memories surface without warning. The way they laughed that night, sitting around the table while I stared at a screen showing the remains of my savings. Leah's dismissive grin. Gavin treating it like a punchline. Mom's shrug, like the money meant nothing. And her words still echo sometimes. That I did not need the money. What they never saw was that it was never just about money. It was time, years of it. It was mental energy. It was every personal boundary they crossed again and again, without remorse. They spent more than dollars. They spent parts of me. And now, for the first time, they are the ones paying the price. I take no joy in their downfall. I do not celebrate their consequences. What I do celebrate is the part of me that chose survival. The part that finally walked away and did not turn back, even when it hurt. Even when the silence that followed felt heavy. Even when old guilt came whispering like it used to. But that silence, it brought something I had never known before. Peace. So if you have always been the one they lean on, the one who picks up the slack, the one who gives and stays silent while being drained, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me a long time ago. You do not owe your self-worth to anyone's comfort. You do not have to burn yourself out just to keep others warm. It is okay to say no. It is okay to walk away. And when you do, when you finally stop shrinking yourself to fit inside someone else's comfort zone, you do not lose your family. You find yourself. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.